Okay, you will notice here that I have my yarn. I have the finished product, which I'm going to go over in a second. I have our needles, which these are 5mm. You can see that printed right there. And 5mm knitting needles are also sometimes referred. We have either millimeters or we have our knitting needle 8. You'll notice that knitting needles have a number associated with them for the size of needle they are. You'll also see our little darning needle, which is going to be important for when we're finishing our project. And I have a pair of craft scissors. Regular scissors are just fine. You don't have to go out of your way to get specialty scissors. A lot of knitters have crafting scissors because they're small. They'll fit anywhere. These actually collapse and fold up, so they're nice to carry around. They don't poke me. Pretty safe. So they're not going to poke through my project bag, which some craft scissors might. Before we really get into it, I do want to talk about gauge. So you'll see on lots of yarn, the thickness, it really depends on the yarn. So this is a medium gauge yarn. You'll see that it has this little number 4. And when yarns typically have a number there, it'll be anywhere from 1 to 7. 7 being the thickest yarn you can get. There can be thicker yarn than 7, just like there can be thinner yarn than 1. And for example, a thinner yarn than 1 would be like thread. We don't have a gauge number for thread for knitting, just because it is pretty fine. Okay, I'm just gonna put this to the side. All right, before we get into the project, I just want to go over these samples that I did show you in class. Yarn knit like this will typically roll up unless you block it. Let's see, this is my cast off edge. So this one was cast off with the simple, or cast on with a simple cast on, and cast off with one of the 2 different cast offs that I showed you. This I think is the first one where you knit a stitch and you bring the cast off, and I will go over those with you. You will see here there are, you can see the stitches, and if you look and you'll see these individual little V's, that is 1 stitch. That's 1 individual stitch, and these are all knit. And if you were to look at the wrong side, we would say these are all purl stitches. Right? Okay. And I have shown you only how to do the knit stitch. And then here you can see I have a different cast on. Yep. And this would be the long tail cast on that I did here. And this would be the stretchier of the 2 cast offs. And this would be knitting 2 and then knitting them together in a way. And so it gives you this nice, like, elastic, much stretchier cast off. And I'm going to show you with the 2. If I were to pull them both, you kind of see this one doesn't want to go further, but this back one, it wants to keep going. And so that's a pretty stretchy cast off. I like that one. All right, so a few things. we learned the garter stitch, which means every row we knit. And then we turn our work over and we knit. And we keep doing that until we got to the length that we wanted. When we sewed it up, we did the whip stitch. And I did show you how to do that, so I'm gonna show you again, and I'm gonna go over all the bits that we did. So this is, I would say, the right side of my work with the whip stitch, and this would be the back, or the wrong side. And I didn't take out the thread because maybe I won't. Maybe I'll just finish this. But you can see, it's very easy to just hide the yarn in. And then when you've hidden it enough, you just go in there and you just snip it off. All right, so I'm gonna move this to the side, and I'm gonna grab my yarn. Okay. Like I said, these are the needles we're using. They are 5mm, and they're also the 5mm size 8 knitting needles. And they're on they're not super long, so very manageable to use. This is the yarn we're using. There's a way to center pull your yarn. So you can just slip this off and then take the yarn out, but I'm gonna find the center and I'm gonna pull it out. Sometimes it comes out in a chunk and sometimes it comes out in one piece. All right, it's coming out in pieces. All right. Okay. Okay. You can see now this is gonna come nicely out. I'm just gonna be able to pull that. Unfortunately, it had quite a large yarn baby. And that happens. And now we just have to find the beginning. I think it's over here somewhere. Nope. Might be in the center of this. There it is. All right. So I'm gonna show you the 2 cast-ons again. So for the simple cast-on, and I really like this cast-on for beginners because, again, in its name, it is very simple, very easy to use. And the reason we just don't wrap it around like this and this start knitting is because trying to knit this, it doesn't want to do the thing we want it to do. I think we would have to go over here and try, and it just doesn't want us to do that. So essentially what we're doing is we're not just wrapping it around, right? We're creating kind of like this backwards loop. So it's goes like this, and then, oh, look at that. Instead of this way, we've just brought it around this way. And now I'm gonna hold this little tail here against my needle, and this way I can have it nice and snug and secure. And then I can use this hand to cast on my stitches. We can cast on for this project anywhere from 30 to 40 stitches. You can cast on more for a wider project or less, but somewhere between 30 and 40 seems to be a good starting point. So I'm gonna cast on 30. And for this, we're gonna do, you can either use your thumb or you can use your index finger. I like to use my index finger because then it's like you point this way, you point that way, and then you slip it on. And you kind of just keep doing that. You point one way and you point another way, slip it on. point this way, point that way, this way. I'll show you with my thumb now. Oh, it's harder for me with the thumb because I usually do it with my index. All right, so wrap it around my thumb, wrap it off. Wrap it around my thumb, slide it on. Around my thumb, slide it on. I'll show you again with the index. Point this way, point that way. Point this way, point that way. I like it this way. It's little finger guns. Point this way, point that way. Slide your needle. All right, so I'm just gonna keep going until I have 30 stitches. So I didn't actually count my stitches, so I'm gonna get to a point where I think I've gotten 30. Oh, that's not 30, but I want to know how many I did. All right, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 18, 20, 24, 26, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. I'm going to count again. A little trick for knitting is all knitters count several times before they start. So if you find yourself counting over and over again, you're in good company. We all do it. 30. Okay. So now we've cast on. We flip our needle and we're going to start knitting from this side. Now this cast on is a little bit on the loose side, so you're gonna have to tighten things up once you get towards the end. You'll notice that this last stitch wants to just fall off at some point, and that's fine. They're simple to just put up back on to your needle, so if you drop a stitch or two at the end, it's okay. We'll just add them back on. And so, here, I'm going to show you what I'm doing. So I'm going to separate the stitch out and I'm going to put it through this part over here. So I'm not putting it in the back of the loop, I'm putting it in this front loop here. And I'm going to insert the needle there. And then I'm going to start knitting. Oh, let's try that again. You will see me sometimes try to lift the stitches. And it's just me moving the yarn around with my needle. This way I can easily get my needle in there, just creating a little bit of space. this first row is also sometimes the hardest row to start. And then once you get further into your project, it gets a little easier. You'll also notice that I'm starting to get a bit of space towards the end of this row, and that's natural. I kind of just tighten the stitches as best I can, and once I get to the last couple stitches, I'll tighten it up a little bit more, and I'll show you that. And this is a very quick cast on. Very simple cast on. And there are multiple ways to cast on. There are so many YouTube videos that will just go into better detail than I can. And a lot of projects will mention what kind of cast on they use. So I'm gonna do this stitch here. And then I'm gonna hold this stitch on this side. You'll see I have this about 2 inches there, maybe 3. I'm gonna tighten that up a bit. And I'll just go in there for that last stitch, pull it off, and then I just tighten that looseness. All right. And then again, I like to double check my work. I'll just count everything. 2, 4, 6, 8, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30. Okay. And so now I'll do another row with you. You'll see it's a little easier the second row. And you'll also notice that I'm wrapping the yarn around my hand. I don't recommend you doing that when you're starting off. It's fine to just grab it, wrap it around, and pull it through. And then tighten it as you need. And you can honestly, between stitches, you can drop the yarn. You don't need to be holding it. And then go into the next stitch. Make sure it's not the tail. Make sure it's the longer piece. Wrap it around. Pull it off. See, I'm not actually holding this piece when I'm doing that. Wrap it around. Pull it through. Wrap it around. Pull it through. You see, I could just easily let it go. All right, we're gonna keep going. Get to the end of this row. And then I'll jump ahead a little bit. And every once and again, I just move my stitches down so they're not just all bunched up towards the top of the needle. You can be like, well, how often do you move them down? It's more of a feel thing. It's probably between every 3 stitches to every 10 stitches that I do that I'm sliding them down. All right. Okay. So I'm gonna do a little camera magic and I'll get back to you on the cast off. Okay, so now I have 10 rows and I'm gonna count them for you. We're gonna look at them and you're gonna see where the rows are. We're gonna do the cast off. So if I get close here, you can see we have the bumps, and then if you pull the bumps apart, between you'll see little V's, right? So the V's are the knit stitch, and the back of the knit stitch are the bumps, and that would be a purl or the wrong side. So if you were to do all purl rows instead of all knit rows, you would get the same exact effect. One side looking like the V's and one side looking like the bumps. Right, like that. Right. And the garter stitch is great because it's nice and stretchy, versus the knit stitch, not as stretchy here, right? Like it doesn't have as much give. But the garter stitch has it's nice and stretchy. Okay, so now we're gonna cast off. And this is gonna be the first cast off I showed you, which is we knit the first stitch, and pull it off. Knit the second stitch, and then pull this stitch over. Pull that first stitch over. So we'll do that again. So this will be the 11th row, the cast off. And so we'll knit, and then we'll take the first stitch here and pull it over the next stitch. And you don't want to do this too tightly, because the tighter you do it, the less give it's going to have. And you can make this really tight and so that it actually bunches up at the top, but I want to give it a little bit of give. So I'm going to do it nice and loose. So my stitches aren't super tight here. I'm giving them enough space to live in there. And then I'm going to pull this stitch over and off my needle. Okay? And we're just going to do that all the way across. Now, the amount of ways there are to cast on and cast off, there's so many. And a lot of patterns are going to show you how, they're going to tell you which cast on they prefer for that pattern. So a lot of patterns will actually ask you to do the long tail cast on, and we'll do that next. Okay, and see, it has a little give, but not too much. So I'm just gonna keep on going along. Knit that stitch, and then pull off that first stitch. Knit that stitch, and pull that one off. Ooh, don't forget to do that. And then the last stitch. So I've wrapped all the stitches over, and I'm just gonna pull the stitch along. So that was that last stitch. And because I don't need to be attached anymore, now I get to cut it. And you want to give yourself about 6 inches, because then we're gonna finish our project up. And that way we'll hide our yarn, our tail inside the yarn. All right, so you can see this has a nice pull to it. It's not too loose, but it doesn't give us too much give. Okay? And there you have it. That is the cast off. All right, now we're gonna do the long tail cast on method. And now the long tail cast on method, like its name, has a long tail. The way it starts is we have to give it a lot of tail in order to be able to put enough stitches on. My trick, if you remember, is I wrap my yarn around about 10 times. And now I know this length here is about 10 stitches. It's not a perfect science, but it gives me a good guesstimate of how much tail I'm gonna need for this. So because I'm casting on 30 stitches, again, I'm gonna need to have this 3 times. So 1, 2, 3. So that's 3 lengths. I'm also gonna give myself just a little bit more because I found I don't always measure that correctly. And I would hate to have to try and cast on again. So for this, we're gonna do a slip knot. So take your yarn, cross it over, bring one piece through that loop in the back, and you're gonna have a little loop there, and then you can put your needle through and then tighten it along. All right, and that's your slip knot. Now we're going to do the long tail, and I make sure my tail is towards the back and the connected yarn is towards me. And I grab both and I put my index and my thumb between the two, and now we're gonna start the long tail method. So I'm just gonna tighten that just a little bit more. Okay, so I go towards my thumb finger first, then my index finger, and then I pull through and tighten. Into the thumb loop first, index, and tighten. And I'm gonna just do that again real slow. So into the thumb loop, then around that index strand, and then let it go off my thumb and tighten. Again. Again, a little tight here. Loosen up a little bit. And you can look up different videos to show you how to do this method. Again, this is the long tail method. And I'm actually pulling these pretty tightly on my needle. Maybe a little too tightly. It doesn't need to be that tight. But I want to make sure you see how I'm doing it. And you don't have to hold them, but I find it easiest to grab the base of my yarn here between these fingers and then use my thumb and my forefinger to do the looping. Again, I grab my yarn and place. And then when you get more comfortable, you can speed up, obviously. All right, so let's count how many stitches we have. 2, 2, 4, 6, 12, 14, 16, 20, 10 more stitches. Okay. So I'm gonna slow down again. You can see my tail here is getting shorter. It is getting shorter. I don't have that much left, right? So the tail will stay long, but it will be shorter than it was. All right, let's slow down again. So again, grab yarn, thumb loop, index loop, pull tight, thumb loop, around the index loop, tight, thumb, tighten, thumb, index, tighten, thumb, index, tighten. All right, I lost count. Again, we count. 2, 6, 28, 2 more. One more. Okay, so I have my 30 stitches, and you can see I still have a tail. It's just not as long as it was, right? And it's always nice to have a tail so that whenever you're finishing up a project, you can hide it in, or you can use it to sew your piece together. All right. So I'm gonna do the knitting for this row, and it's just like the knit stitches before. And you will see my tail is towards me, and then the yarn I want to use is leaning towards the back. I'll just put the tail behind. I'm going to hold it in this hand while holding this needle, and then I'm going to use the connected yarn. And then I'll put it through the loop. And you can see this has more stability than that simple cast on, right? These stitches are not going anywhere. And I did do this a bit tightly, so I'm just gonna keep going around. I'm gonna keep doing this row. It's just the same as before with the other row. This is the foundation row. This will help keep everything stable, keep your cast on. It's gonna essentially help you build the rest of your project up. It's the cast on, and that first row really helps stabilize and help keep your stitches formed. And I will pause here on the video, and then I'll jump ahead a little bit so that you can see a different cast off. Okay, so I did not do 10 rows, and mostly because we don't need them. So this is the second stretchy cast off. If you're finding that the first cast off, your stitches are just too tight and you would prefer a little bit more stretch to your edge, which is like this, we're gonna do this stretchy cast off. All right. All right. So again, we knit that first stitch. We knit the second stitch. And then we knit them. We take that our left needle, put it into both stitches, and then we knit them together. So now we're gonna knit this next stitch, and we're gonna put our left needle again into both stitches and knit together. Okay, so you're gonna have a stitch on this needle until we hit the end. So again, this is a nice stretchy bind off. Knit the next stitch, pull it off your needle, take your left needle again, put it through both loops, wrap around, and knit through those two loops. Knit again, take your left needle, put it again through both loops, wrap around, and knit through both stitches. You can see it feels nice and stretchy compared to the other bind off. All right, so I'm gonna go through all 30 of these stitches, or 20 something of these stitches, and you'll also see with the garter stitch, these bind offs look very nice, I'll say. I'm very happy with the way they look with the garter stitch. And again, depending on the knitting pattern you're using, they may say to use a specific kind of bind off, and they'll name it, and hopefully you'll be able to find a video you like of that kind of bind off. And honestly, the amount of ways there are to cast on, there are the same number of ways to cast off. And for this cast off, you can knit tighter. You will still have that stretchiness to it. Oh, let's try that again. Through two loops, pull off. Oh, just try that again. You'll sometimes see the yarn splits a little bit. That's okay. Just keep going. You'll get more comfortable with that as you knit. And some yarns are more forgiving than others. There will be yarns you'll use that split all the time, and then there will be yarns you use that never split. And honestly, you won't know until you start using them. And as I get to the end of the row, you'll see that last stitch is not so scary. All right, so I'm gonna knit that last stitch like I have all the others, and knit through these stitches. And then, instead of letting it fall, I'm just gonna pull it out and then keep pulling until I have about 6 inches through. And then, there I go, cut, and then pull through. And I finished that edge. Look at that. Nice and stretchy. And you can see, I'm gonna count the stitches for you. So this was our cast on. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 rows, is that right? Yeah, I think I did 7 rows. Let's count that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then my cast off at 7. So that's 7 rows. And then we'll look back at this other row, this other sample I did. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then my cast off row. See that? It's very easy to see that these bumps, especially with the bumps, I usually just do it by twos. So 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10, and then the cast off. Yep. You can see how stretchy this one is. It wants to go off camera. And then this one, not so much. Again, this one, it wants to just keep going, and this one, not so much. It's more structured there. All right. Okay, so I'm now going to show you how to sew the ends of your project together. I'm going to put my scissors aside, and I actually took apart this so I can show you how you do it. And for this, I gave myself a nice liberal amount of yarn to sew the edges together. And I try to do at least 3 lengths of the project. So 1, 2, 3. It looks like I did more than 3. It's about 4 lengths. So 4 lengths is safe. You don't need 4 lengths, but at least 3 lengths of yarn. So what I'm gonna do now is get my darning needle, and sometimes it splits at the end. My trick is to fold it over and shove it through. You'll get parts of the yarn through. Some yarn is more forgiving than others. Start to split there, see, it's started to split. And then I have it, and so I'll just pull it through a little bit so it's not so super long. And make sure I have what I would consider the wrong side facing me. So right now this is my right side. I'm gonna flip it around and I'm gonna line up my edges just like that. And I'm gonna start where my tail ends. So because I'm a righty, I'm gonna flip over my work just like that. And I'm gonna start at this end and end over here. And you'll see I have a little tail. I have my really long tail that I'm using, and then I have a tiny tail. And we'll sew that in later. So this is maybe one of the simplest ways to complete your project. And we're honestly just gonna go through, and each stitch you can see going through, and you don't have to go through the stitch per se, you just have to get it through there. And because this is acrylic yarn and it splits a lot, do your best, do the best you can. If you go through the yarn, it's okay. It's not gonna fall apart. This is pretty sturdy yarn, so we're gonna just start pulling it through. So one there, and then we just keep going along. And you'll see it starts, you'll see there's a bit of, there we go. You'll see this side has these diagonal stitches along, but on the other side, on the right side of your work, it'll look pretty good. That's the side you're gonna see most. And if you don't like the way it looks, you can pull it out and do it again. It's perfectly fine to do it that way. I know some people who like to take this tail here and have it alongside and then have the whip stitch around it. You can do that. You wouldn't have to work it in later. But again, this is super simple, super quick. If you lose your darning needle, they're really easy to get. And there are other ways to finish projects, and they'll state in the pattern how they would like you to sew together their seams. You'll hear things like the mattress stitch, or I forget the other ones, but they're all pretty similar. You're going with along where the stitches are. So once I finish this piece, I'll show you what it looks on the other side. Don't knock over my tea. I'm gonna start to I'm just trying to keep it within the stitches. And if it were really complicated, I would have you use stitch markers to keep pieces together so that it wouldn't fall. But since it's not a very large seam, you don't really need it. The stitch markers kind of just help keep things together. I'll have projects with, I don't know, 30 or 40 stitch markers that are just there, honestly, as like safety pins, just to keep the project together. But these seams, the edges are pretty even, so you don't have to worry about that. If you're doing the stretchy bind off, just make sure that you're doing 1 stitch per whip stitch. You don't want to be misaligning your edges. You want to make sure that this edge and this edge, they're not overlapping or they're not misaligned. So now if we turn our project over, you can see we have a nice little seam there, right? It's not super noticeable, but it's there. And now for hiding in our yarn, I'm just gonna pull it into this edge one more time. And then honestly, I like to just go down where I was knitting in my seam and just go down a bit. You don't have to go down super far. I go down about an inch or two, pull through. Sometimes I'm like, I have so much extra yarn, maybe I'll go down more. And then once I'm happy with that, I just snip. That's it. And then for this end, I'm gonna rethread using my darning needle. And it's a little rounded here, so I'm just gonna pull it through here into that stitch. So it's nice and even. And then I'm gonna go through again, just down my seam, through my stitches, through the whip stitch. And you don't want to pull it because then we start to have some cinching there. So make sure you give yourself a little bit of, if you do that, just pull it back. And then I'll go down a little bit more. And don't pull too tight. There we go. And once I'm happy with the length, snip. There's our whip stitch on the wrong side, and here it is on the right side. Super simple. All right, you'll notice I have a different color yarn here, and this is a little bit of scratch yarn that I have. And I'm going to just take one of my samples, and I'm gonna take my darning needle, and I'm gonna show you what the knit stitch looks like. Actually, I'm gonna do it in this one so you can see what a knit stitch looks like and what a purl stitch looks like on this side. So I'll thread my darning needle. All right. And what I'm doing right now is called doubling. You'll see some fiber artists who like to do doubling for to put kind of cute and cool patterns. So this is a little bit of a bonus. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna find the middle of a V. And right now I see right here is a nice middle of a V. I'm gonna pull that through. And I see here is one leg of it and here's the other leg of it. So I'm gonna go this way through the horizontal bar of that. Make sure everything stays on one side. And then I'm gonna go back where I came from. And that is one knit stitch right there. So I'm gonna tighten that a little bit. Right there, that is one knit stitch, and I've just doubled it with this blue yarn. Now, I'm gonna do a purl stitch, and I'll go down the same row. I'm gonna show you what that looks like. So here's the V, and I'll find, here's one piece. Oh, I wanna make sure nothing's tangling in the back. And I'm gonna put this in this part of the horizontal bar there. I'm gonna pull it through ever so slightly. And that is a purl stitch right there. That is one purl. Okay? So you can see these horizontal bars across, those will be purl stitches, and these like this, those are knit stitches. And you've been doing it. You've been doing horizontal in your garter stitch, right? See right there, those little bumps, those are purls. So you have been doing them, you've just been doing them backwards by just knitting a bunch. And when we do our next workshop, I'm hoping to do like a advanced beginners, introducing the purl stitch and some other techniques. Thank you.